Welcome to Country Fried Rock, where we talk with musicians to find out what inspires their creativity. Country Fried Rock. Music uncovered.
Hey, Sloane, how you doing? This is Aaron from the band Shurman.
Hey, Erin. Thanks a bunch for being with us. I'm so glad I got to meet you in Nashville this year.
What a fun time that was. Wasn't that great? AMH's great. I just had such a blast.
Perfect weather. Perfect time. Country Fried Rock out in Nashville. A little outdoor show of you solo.
Yeah, it was kind of a last-minute thing that popped in with some old friends, and I never turned down a show with, if I can make music with old friends, that's kind of as good as it gets,
that is exactly what music festivals are all about.
It really is, because you're, a lot of those times the bands that are playing are doing it in order to get exposure. They're not doing it for the huge payday. And so you're kind of in there just going, well, okay, I'm eating this show, I'm handling the expenses, I'm doing this, I'm taking care of myself, which as musicians have a hard time doing, in case you haven't heard.
Yeah.
But, all those kind of conferences you get to with all your old friends who are touring all over the country as well, and you don't get to see them except for maybe South by Southwest and the AMAs and all clients and the CMJ. And, a couple of times a year, you all get together, and you're lucky enough, there's instruments around, and everybody gets to play some songs, and, not only catch up on what everybody's girlfriends, wives, kids, brothers, sisters, moms, and dads are doing, but also, get to catch up musically on what everyone's got coming down, the creative pipeline as far as what's their new song or what's something that they're excited about. And a lot of times, what bands we're kind of all listening to, And,
it's funny that you say that, because that's actually how I found you. We did an interview a while back with Josh and Teal from the Mother Truckers, and that's how I found Shurman.
Oh, yeah. We love Josh and Teal. They both make appearances, not on the same song, but in separate songs on our holiday record that we have, a little Shurman holiday album.
Oh, and, cool.
Teal sings a song. I always wanted to do a duet with her, so I wrote a song to do with my drummer and bass player, Mike. And then I also always wanted to have an instrumental, just like full-on, guitar, rock, instrumental, and never been able to do that. When you're friends with someone like Josh Z, those kind of things seem a little bit more possible.
So wait, I know that you have other things in the work for 2012. You have a holiday record out, too?
Yeah, we just released it last week, as a matter of fact. It's been incredibly successful. I mean, it's the most records we've ever sold online of any album we've done. It's basically, after we finished our last studio record, it was kind of as a joke. Our bass player said, it was the end of July, middle of August when we were wrapping up the new studio record Inspiration. And we were experiencing what was the hottest summer that Texas had ever had in the history of keeping track of temperature. And we had almost 100+ days, and we had just built our new studio, and we didn't quite, one of the last things that we kind of dealt with when we were making the studio was the air conditioning and the how will we cool this thing off kind of a deal. 2-story, little mini house behind our drummer's house. It's just, we call it our little tree house. But it was 125 degrees in that studio, and you had to keep the AC off while we were tracking, so there was very much a sense of urgency. We've got to get this thing, or I'm going to pass out. And as a joke, we kind of said at the end, we should make a Christmas record. It's 104 degrees in Texas, and and we're writing songs about, it's snowing outside, and all this kind of stuff, and we were doing it totally tongue-in-cheek.
Right.
But we started, writing these songs, this is a good song, and so we started recording it and sending some stuff around to our friends, kind of jokingly, like John Popper from Blues Travel.
Yeah.
Our buddies from Roger Klein, the Peacemakers, and his friends in Stone Honey. And we ended up thinking, why don't you guys come down and help us make this record? We're going to just do some originals and maybe a couple of choice little covers, like we did a cover of a band. I didn't know that the band did a Christmas song, but a fan sent it to us.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, it's a song called Christmas Must Be Tonight. They actually did a few different alternate takes of it on Kingdom Come record, I think it was. And they sent us a copy of the song, and we loved it, and we wouldn't actually cut it. Got the guys from Stone Honey to come in and do some harmony vocals, and Phil from Stone Honey played lead guitar on it. So, yeah, it was really kind of a cool project.
When I first heard about the band Shurman, I was trying to spell it with an E. And, we're based in the South, and the war is not over yet here. So
that's exactly why it's with you.
I thought, wow, that's really brave of a Texas band to name themselves Shurman.
Well, it's even crazier because my high school years, and my mother lives in Georgia. And so, to have General Shurman as part of your name after what he did in the Civil War, probably not the best marketing tip. And oddly enough, that's how the name came about. There's a couple different reasons. It was one of those things where the name clicked with me because for a few different reasons in my life, I thought of it when I was younger. I thought about naming a band Shurman because my mother went to high school in Denison, Texas, and their arch rival was the Shurman Bearcats, and I always thought that would be really funny, because at the time I was trying to put together punk bands, and if you had a punk band, it didn't offend your parents or at least them off a little bit. It wasn't a really good name, so it was kind of like early on. It was, that was in junior high when I was putting together punk, my skate punk days, and it's funny enough. I don't remember what it was. I was talking to a friend of mine, Ben Peeler, on the phone, and he said, we were talking about the Super Bowl was going on in Atlanta, and he said, you know what they need? They need Shurman to come back through there and melt all that ice. It's just kind of a joke, Right. And I was like, and it was like, you know what? And at the time, the band was called Blue Train, which is just a horrible name. And that's even the funnier story is like, I basically living in I got offered a gig. I was out at the bar, and this guy who was like, yeah, book the Whiskey a Go-Go, and I just moved to L.A., and I was, starry-eyed trying to put the band together, and I didn't even have a band, and I just said, I have a band, I want to come play there. He goes, great, man. He's like, how about next Friday night? And he's like, what's the name of the band? And I was looking around the room, and there was all these posters, all these rock posters everywhere in this bar that we were at, but there was also this, from the corner, it was that John Coltrane poster that said Blue Train on it.
Yeah.
I was like, Blue Train. And I came to find out later that they were the guys who did. Blue Train was the two guys for Baywatch.
Right.
It wasn't really a really hip name.
Yeah, you're cool. When you started your first little skate punk band, were you writing your own stuff then, or were y'all covering punk music?
Yeah. I was writing, I kind of got into music through, I had an English teacher who, I always really loved music growing up, but I had an English teacher in middle school who got me into all these poetry contests. Started getting really into that. It was funny because I was a lost kind of punk kid trying to get into sports, and awkward in 7th grade, taller guy in my class, and was doing poetry. And I kind of really thought about it. And then I entered a few of these contests, and I won one of them. And I actually got to the point where I was like, Vic, your poetry's kind of hokey, but with songwriting, now that's pretty cool. That's something that the chicks will like. I learned really quickly. Okay, this all right. I get it. The rest is a lot of truck stops and Ford Econoline vans down the road,
Did you have some musical styles or specific bands that you were trying to model yourself after?
When I was first coming out, I was into punk rock. I think secretly I wanted to be a member of Van Halen, I think everybody did in the early 80s, and you were living I lived up in North Dallas, and I just remember a friend of mine's mom took us to go see Van Halen in concert, and I came out with 4 bandanas tied around my left leg, if that tells you anything. So, Mom, I think I want to get a sword for Christmas. She's like, a sword? What are you going to do with a sword? And I was like, I don't know. David Lee Roth throws one around. Looks pretty cool. Seems to get a lot of chicks. I don't know.
Women will throw their underwear on stage at me, Mom, if I do this.
Exactly, right? It does something. I haven't figured it out. I figured out that the results are positive results, but I can't figure out why the sword is doing this. I didn't get it until I saw, Song Remains the Same. Then it's full circle. Hey, this is Aaron from Shurman on Country Fried Rock.
As you were first forming those bands, what kind of music were y'all working on, and how did that move to where you are now?
I'd say it was a lot more folk and a lot more country. We had a stand-up bass player at the time, and so I was an Air Force brat as a young kid. So I kind of traveled around a lot, and my family just in general, Winnebagos and trailers and pop-up trailers, and their idea of having a good weekend was going camping for 3 days. And so, the camaraderie of being on the road, it was just something that always just really, 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 really came, for me, it's something I've always loved. Still to this day, it's one of my favorite parts about, being a musician. But, I did a lot of traveling kind of growing up, and I think it kind of set me on a path of, wanting to make music. But when I went right before I moved to Hawaii, I guess there's this long-winded circular story here. I had a bunch of friends that were going to be moving out to Hawaii. We were all kind of saving our money, and what I was actually doing, I was working on a mountain as a lift stop in the summer. I just kind of bailed out of college at Arizona State, and I was like, what am I going to do? I'll go up to Colorado mountains. It's snowing, and I've always wanted to do that. So I got a job doing that. I met a bunch of these crazy, mean guys who were all kind of getting into this new sport called snowboarding. And everybody was it was a really cool time to be there. A bunch of us had this kooky plan that when the snow melted, we were going to save up all the money we made at the resort and go to Hawaii. And at the time, my dad was a pilot, so I flew for free. And said, this will be, I can still come home for Christmas. And we lived there for a while. I ended up going out there for a few years, and I only went out with a handful of records. And one of those records was the Uncle Tupelo record. the one with the date in 1992, whatever. And I just was over the moon about that record. And it's funny because right before I left town, I had a neighbor. Hey, he's like, I got a couple of records for you before you leave, and I think you'll really dig this. And he was like, one of them is a band called Whiskey Town. I was like, oh, I'd actually, I'd read something about those guys. And he gave me this record, Rural Feed Delivery, which was the first record, and he gave me Uncle Tupelo record. And not to an long story, I'd actually seen them years previously accidentally to a friend named Josh Rouse. In my songwriting, I was a duo with this guy in college named Josh Rouse, who's another Americana guy you might have heard of. He's a really, really great singer, songwriter. And he took me to see Uncle Tupelo one time, and I had no idea who they were, and changed my path, musically. So those were the records I wrote over in Hawaii. So when I came to LA, I really wanted to start a band, and I was living and, crashing on a friend's couch in Hollywood. And I thought, I want to start like a really broken down country band with banjo and a lap steel and stand-up bass and brushes on drums, and I'll play acoustic. And we did, and it was actually really funny. We actually ended up, our very first show was opening up for John Doe. No way! And it was just like, wow, this is kind of a good way to start this. And one of our second or third show was opening for Whiskey Town at Whiskey Go-Go. No way! And I remember thinking, there's something going on here, because I looked out in the audience and I recognized the singer from Green Day and Winona Ryder and all these stars, and James Iha from Smashing Pumpkins. All these people were in the audience. And I was like, wow, this country thing here is and it was cool because I'd grown up in East Texas, and I'd grown up listening to all kind of what I call outlaw country and Jerry Jeff and all that. My dad was the oldest of 5 boys, and I was around my uncles a lot, and they had a very big influence on me musically. They listened to everything from Nugent to Skinner, and then they listened to all kinds of just David Allan Coe and funky outlaw, this guy said something vulgar type country rock. Did he say that? Oh my God. I don't know, just it was actually a lot more country than Shurman is now. I mean, I'd say we still have those themes in our music. We still have, our guitar player plays banjo, and we still have lap steel and all that stuff and train beats and songs. But I think we tried to expand that a little bit more into more of rock and roll and kind of soul music, because I really wanted to do something that was a lot more Motown sounding as far as vocally. I wanted to be something that kind of, I like to say, those little earworms that get in your ear and you just can't stop thinking, you can't stop hearing them, like all those Motown hits. So I'm going back to the kind of old soul kind of thing that's happening.
There's a lot of that. And it's funny because it's coming from a roots perspective, though.
It's kind of like the old roots and the old blues and old folky. They kind of had those really small amps that were kind of distorting with funky hollow body guitar, and it's a certain guitar tone. You hear it on all the Lucinda Williams records and Steve Earle's records, and you hear it in Kenny Vaughan and all these guys that are just to me, the people who are really some of the best people in the genre. All three of those people I think are just saints, and you're hearing all their music, and it's just that kind of there's just I don't know, but it grabs me, and it's one of those things that is how I really connect with a lot of these bands. And bands, even in town, when I go see them play the first time, like the Band of Heathens and some of these people, that's I heard that guitar sound that, this guy grew up, he likes David Lindley, he probably listens to Little Feat. Oh, right, he likes the Byrds. I can hear it, I can hear this guy listen to Richard. That guitar tone, it's these people are part of a tribe,
Yeah. And you do hear that even just listening to it. I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's I was just thinking, you hear it in the Sunvolt records and all those. It's to me, it's the one thing that kind of, it seems to tie a lot of things together,
It's been a while since the last Shurman record, but then suddenly you have a lot coming on in this calendar year with the Semi-Joke Christmas record that ended up being kind of a cool little side project.
Yeah, it's the business year that I can remember. It's kind of, I went out at the beginning of this year and did a few months on the road with my buddy John Popper from Blues Traveler. Shurman had opened up for Blues Traveler a couple tours ago, or even a couple years ago, I guess. And the tour wrapped up at Fillmore in San Francisco. And it was just one of those days where, John was sitting backstage and I was showing the band some new songs that I'd written. And I figured if you're going to play the Fillmore and you want to work out some songs, at sound check, Fillmore's probably the,
You may as well.
If you're gonna do it. Like, if you're going to get new vibe or the ghosts from Rock and Roll Past, they're going to be there anywhere. Right. So John happened to hear our sound check and came up to me after sound check and said, hey, I really dug those new tunes you were showing the band, and I have this band that I'm putting together, and I would love for you to be part of it.
Cool.
He said, I have an old friend, John O'Manson, from back in the New York days. He kind of brought us and the Spin Doctors up, and he's just an incredible performer, and he's going to be producing the record, and we're going to make it at his house or at his studio out in Santa Fe. And, he was kind of talking all this stuff, and I was like thinking, you hear about these things. I mean, I've looked up to John musical since the first Horde Festival that I was at.
Yeah.
And I was at the very first one, and we probably went to all of them. It's where I saw Wilco for the first time, and the Mother Hip, and Sheryl Crow, and a lot of bands that I ended up really loving. And he was just like, I'll get you a call. And a couple months later, he called and said he was coming to Austin. We wrote some songs. I wrote a few songs for the record, and we ended up in Santa Fe, New Mexico for like 5 weeks, and we made a record. Me, him, and John, and a really great rhythm section, and a bunch of great players from the New Mexico area, and people that John has known for a long time. And it just kind of turned into this little project where we were starting to, we ended up getting a record deal, and we ended up going on the road and getting the tour bus and the whole crew, and all this, it was just kind of crazy out of nowhere. And we're playing, some of the late night TV shows, and that's how the year started. We put out a record in February, and it was, I basically toured with John Popper and the Dust Gray Troubadours through June, and also doing Shurman dates, and both of us doing South by Southwest, and crazy kind of schedule. And I had a 6 or 5 month old son at home.
Oh my goodness.
And then as soon as the tour was over, I took some of the, things that I got from the tour, and we built and put together our own recording studio here in Austin with some of the stuff, that I collected, and our drummer had a lot of gear, and we actually put together our own recording studio and put it all together and recorded a couple of records. I had a couple of records come out on, labels, and my first record came out on Vanguard.
Right.
The last record came out on Sustain, which is part of Universal Republic.
Right.
Really, going through that whole machine, one of the things that really happens to you musically is they kind of keep you from releasing much material because they're really trying to really wring out every, ounce of music out of an ounce of time out of these tracks that you submitted for an album.
Right.
And realistically, that album has taken, maybe you recorded 3 years ago and you're on the road promoting it, sick and tired of the tune. I mean, I went through that in spades.
Yeah.
And I decided that, one of the things we did with the John record that we went into a studio with the band, and I took some classes in Pro Tools and learned how to edit and produce and make records as far as the technical aspect of it. And our drummer and bass player, we all kind of took these classes, and we learned how to make records, and we got the gear that we wanted at our own place, and we never have to ask again if it's okay for us to go make a record. So, what did we do when we came there? We went and made 3 records, and then we even went and recorded a live record as well. So we really had a prolific time, and we plan on releasing at least a record every year, and hopefully 2, because, my previous release, history was every 4 years, and I started to look at it as it'd be like releasing a record as a freshman in high school and saying all these things about how you feel about girls and life and all that stuff, and then trying to stand behind that as you're graduating as a senior. And it's just changed. I mean, that's how much your headspace is different. Where you're like, I had no idea what I was talking about. Oh my goodness. And that's kind of how it is about releasing a record every 4 years. You almost feel like, that was 4 years ago, and that's how I felt, and that's something that, impacted me greatly. And moved me to write. It's but I don't feel that way now, maybe.
Right. It's interesting that you point that out because, even something that may start out very authentic like that, at some point you've moved past it. And it explains, I guess, for listeners sometimes why something might not feel real after time, even though it may have been at the initiation of it.
I mean, I think I was. A friend of mine sent me a video just the other day of this little show. Ryan Adams recently played on Letterman, and he did an hour and 50 minute set. To let you come and play a couple songs if you want to. They'll let you play as long as you want, but most people just do a couple songs because they know it's being recorded. And he sat down and played, but he did that song. New York. I'll always love you, New York. But he did it really slow with a piano, and it was it probably had a whole different kind of meaning to him now than it did when it came out right around 9/11.
Yep.
I mean, I think that and that's how you keep material current, I think. And it's something we really strive to do with Shurman. Is some of the older songs we do in our set, we try to do, if they were a barn burner, telly, rock and roll song, maybe try doing it with a banjo roll and a nylon string guitar with brushes on the snare. Change it into something that you feel is lyrics for me, one of the things I try to not tell people a lot about what songs are about is because they change sometimes,
Right.
you know? And a song that maybe it wasn't written for someone per se is later on is about that person. And I've done a lot of things in my life where it's like I'll write a song about something and then it'll happen, you know, like about, you know, a song about leaving Los Angeles and coming back to Texas, you know, for this new record. And lo and behold, it's like I wrote that song before I moved to Texas. And it's funny enough, it's like sometimes you'll put these things into motion, you know, with words. And I think you can look at it as from a creating your own destiny, you know, if you want to get new agey better, or however you want to look at it. But, you know, you can kind of put these wheels in motion by doing these things. So, like I said, a song will change after you sing it for a while. What you're thinking, your intent in the delivery of the lyric is different now. And if you've written the song with enough like little pictures in there that can be looked at from a couple different angles,
For sure.
then you have a chance to kind of move around in that song and have like other experiences with it, which I think is really kind of cool. It's something I just recently discovered, and it's helped me to really rediscover some of my older material that I kind of had shied away from playing unless someone was really adamant about, like, no, I want to hear Stay off your first record. You know, like, okay, I know the song, I remember the lyrics, so I just kind of rediscovering it another way to kind of play it. It kind of makes some of the older material seem fresh again, you know? Hey, everybody, it's Aaron from Shurman. Make sure you go out and pick up our new record, Inspiration, at your local vinyl store or at www.shermanville.com. Country Fried Rock.
What has Austin brought your music?
I think authenticity that maybe, and a confidence that I have never had, you know. I really was overwhelmed by this town every time I would tour and come through here. And it was a town that I stopped in a lot. It was always in the back of my mind that one day I would just love to live in Austin. I mean, you know, I'm a native Texan, so I always thought about returning to the state at some point, you know, just when you start thinking about kids and that kind of the lifestyle I was able to lead as a kid, you know, with being the kind of boy that was in third grade and could have walk out of my house without having anyone to really have to worry about some creepy dude in a van down the street. I mean, I basically would walk from my house to a big lake with my black lab dog and my Daisy BB gun and a fishing pole. I would spend the whole afternoon, and no one was worried about, you know, whatever. You know, I grew up in a very innocent place in East Texas. No one was worried about it. They're more worried about you dying from boredom or something like that, you know. I always thought Austin was just a town that just had so much musical history. And then the more I learned about, you know, musical history of Austin, I realized, God, I don't even know. I need to really study this a little bit more. As I came to know the people who shaped this town, I realized why there's so many musicians here. And, you know, it's one of those towns where you go to the bank and you tell them, I'm a musician, and they don't go, oh. They don't look at you like, oh, you know, like this check's is going to bounce, you know.
Right.
Here it's like almost like, they're like, girl, that's great. Oh, really? Where do you play? You play around town? Yeah, my neighbor plays in Sleep at the Wheel, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I don't know, it's just a town that's really, really supportive. And I came here, I was really overwhelmed by the talent and also by the camaraderie of all these people who seem to know each other, and we're at all the shows, and wow, you know, this guy's hanging out from this band and this band and this band, and I know this guy, and he plays here, and he plays in this band, and he's also in a side band with Alejandro Escovedo, et cetera, et cetera. And now that's my life, you know. It's like I have all these friends here, or these great bands that I really love, that if I wasn't friends with them anyways, I would be at the show. And it just so happens they're a friend of mine, so I'm able to kind of maybe, you know, get backstage and drink some beer while they're playing, you know, which is always a perk. But, you know, I just feel really, no, I mean, seriously, I feel really, really blessed to be in this town. There's so much talent. It's like one of those things where you can go out on a Monday night and see Ian McLaughlin from the Faces for free, you know, and it's like, oh my God. I mean, where else in the world is that even a possibility? And it's here, it's just really genuine, and people don't. It's like you run into Robert at the Whole Foods, and he lives in town, and no one's acting crazy or asking any weird questions. He's just like, he's here hanging out with, you know, Nancy Griffith, and they're getting some, you know, soy cheese. Right. It's not a big deal, you know. It's like, you know, I don't know, this town just got, there's no pretentiousness, at least not much that I've found. I mean, there are, in any town, and the biggest band in town has always got some sort of air of, like, you know, we're the biggest band in town. Yeah, whatever. But, you know, here it's this, like, no one really cares. And I'm coming from Los Angeles. I mean, it's like, it's just a complete difference. Here, people are playing down everything they're doing. Oh, yeah, man, I heard your song on it. Yeah, you know, it's TV. I don't really watch TV. And in L.A., it's like, they're coming out going, you know, in L.A., they're coming out going, did you hear my song on my TV show? And everyone's like, you mean that show that you did in your cousin's basement that comes on at, you know, 5 a.m.? Cable access. No, I didn't see it. And, you know, neither did anyone else. So shut up about it, you know? Like, you know, kind of difference, I think. And I have so many great friends in Los Angeles. I'm not bragging on the state of California. I love it. Beautiful. And I just love living there, and I still love going back there. But, I don't miss the whole, like, trying to get ahead thing that happens in LA and at any cost. That's the nasty part of it, where it's just like, you meet these people and you're like, God, I know this person has a great heart, and they moved out here from Kentucky, and yeah, they're in a desperate spot, and they're clawing their way up to the top, and they're doing it at the expense of all these friendships and relationships. And, I'm not saying that doesn't happen to everybody a little bit in this music business. Some along the way, it's hard to keep everybody happy and keep yourself, But at the same time, life's about having, like, a synchronicity and a relationship with people who is mutually beneficial to everyone involved. And it's like, you get so much further when you're trying to help each other up rather than trying to stuff each other down so you can get up a little bit higher. Instead of just bringing everybody up with you, where you guys can make a human pyramid and, get the top of that beanstalk.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a laid-back town in general. And you know what? We have good barbecue here.
Ooh, see, I'm gonna have to get you
good barbecue.
Ooh, I'm gonna have to argue with you on that, because y'all eat beef barbecue.
Oh, you better believe it. For breakfast.
It's pork. Pork is barbecue.
Ooh. I can do ribs that way, but I don't know the rest of
the one thing I will give is, at least barbecue is a noun for you all as well. It's not an action that you do outside.
Exactly. Oh, you better believe it.
Having had the chance to live and travel in places and stuff, what have you discovered to eat or drink on the road that's been something you want to seek out again?
One of my favorite things, you were talking about the South, and I was thinking about some things that we really like. We always seem to get when we go through the Southeast, is we're always trying to get Brunswick stew.
Ooh, yeah.
It's kind of there's a place in Noonan, Georgia that we'll go to. It's off Highway 41. And there's something every time we have like a little ritual. You come out of Atlanta and you jump down Highway 41. You throw some Allman Brothers on. And you get about halfway through Eat a Peach when you pull up in this place. And it's just a great little, like one of those places. And we all, we joke a lot on the road that one of the things we're about to start, just jokingly, is that barbecue vlog, because it seems like every time we go to, someone's trying to tell us what a great place for barbecue is.
Oh, yeah.
We're trying weird things. Like, hey, this guy, he does these things, these Dr. Pepper ribs, and you got to come over here and check the place out. I believe our guitar player Harley's going to start a barbecue vlog, because we literally joked that all we eat on the road is Mexican food and barbecue, and it's like I guess that's part of how we keep in touch with being at home in Austin, is by finding tacos, late night taco trucks, and barbecue joints on the road. It's kind of reminds us of home, I guess. My favorite barbecue place in the whole world is a place called Cooper's Barbecue, and it's in Llano, Texas, and they have one in New Braunfels now. It just recently opened up, and Terry Cooper is the guy over there who's kind of is our buddy, who's one of the family. He just handles all of our CD release parties. He just brings out enough food for 100 people for our whole backstage area and all our friends and family. So we kind of have a little bit of like a barbecue sponsorship, and I feel like we kind of made it. I don't really know what else we need. We have guitar strings, and we have a guitar string deal. We have a barbecue deal. Well,
it's going to be an exciting 2012 for you then.
It sure is.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, Aaron. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Country Fried Rock. Find the full playlist from this episode on countryfriedrock.org. Check us out on iTunes. No music, just talk. Our theme music is from The Full Tones. Our Country Fried Rock stinger is from Steve Soto and the Twisted Hearts. Country Fried Rock. Copyright 2012 by Lilypad Productions. All rights reserved.
Ever he been helping us some country fried rock?
Hey y'all, it's Sloane Spencer. Thanks so much for finding all these new old episodes of Country Fried Rock. I've got something completely different available these days called Sleep with Rock Stars. And it all started from a listener comment back in the very early days of Country Fried Rock who said, I slow these down to 75% and fall asleep to them. And I was like, well, over the years I started thinking about it, and I recently started Sleep with Rock Stars. It's the Gen X sleep podcast, and you can find it at sleepwithrockstars.com or your favorite podcast app.